10 o'clock. Quorum appears to be present. Actuarial Committee meeting will come to order. Ms. McLaughlin, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Sorry. Keith Brainerd.
Here.
Marcia Dush.
Here.
Daniel Harper.
Here.
Thank you. We're all here. Welcome, Daniel. We can see and hear you.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Item 3, members have received the minutes of the last meeting. Are there corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as circulated.
So moved.
Second. Motion's been made by Ms. Dush, seconded by Mr. Brainerd to approve the minutes as presented. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved as circulated. Let me take a step backward. Mr. Harper, welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to have been invited and look forward to serving and learning from y'all.
You'll find that this is where the action is.
Perfect.
Just kidding. We hope you can join us in person sometime.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's time for opening remarks from committee members. This is an opportunity for committee members to provide any remarks they may have before getting further into other items on the agenda. Does any member have any remarks tonight? Hearing none, we can move forward. This is our opportunity for public comment. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience, in person or virtually, who has comments they would like to provide to the committee? If so, please step forward now. Seeing no one, we will move right on to the next agenda item, updates on rule review, possible need for funding soundness restoration plan rule revisions or statutory recommendations. I will now call on David Fee, PRB Staff Actuary, and Tamara Ehrenstein, our legal counsel, to present item 6. Welcome.
Committee members. Tamara Ehrenstein, General Counsel, presenting with David Fee on FSRP rule revisions and statutory recommendations. So first, an overview of our presentation today. I'll provide an update on where we are in the rulemaking and statutory review process, including providing some information on stakeholder comments received so far. And Mr. Fee will provide an update on the potential rules, including draft guidance documents and the preliminary draft rules, as well as the draft statutory recommendations. In your packet, you'll find the draft proposed rules, draft statutory recommendations, and draft guidance documents, which are the inadequate funding notice and progress update form. In that order, we welcome feedback, discussion, and questions from the committee at any time. So first, an update on the rulemaking process and timeline. You've seen a similar slide at the January Actuarial Committee meeting and the February board meeting, which kicked off this project. In March, we sought input from stakeholders on the initial concept presented at those 2 previous meetings, and we'll cover what we learned shortly. Today, the bolded date, we are presenting proposed changes for the committee's consideration and feedback. We'll conduct a second round of stakeholder feedback in May and make any necessary modifications to the draft rules based on feedback from the committee today and anything that we learned from stakeholders as well. The input we receive from the committee today and stakeholders in the coming weeks will help us shape any needed changes. And the next time that you will see these draft rules will be at the July board meeting, where staff anticipates potential board action to publish the proposed rules. Then adoption of the rules would be considered at the September board meeting. And later this year, in October through December, staff would implement and conduct outreach on any rule changes and incorporate any legislative recommendations in the biennial report. So next, stakeholder engagement. As I mentioned, we sent out the preliminary rule and statutory concepts to all agency stakeholders in March. We received 4 comments, and I'll provide a high-level overview here. Mr. Fee will mention the relevant comments in a bit more detail as he walks the committee through the preliminary draft rules. One commenter supported several of the recommendations. Another supported the agency developing guidelines or a standardized form for FSRP updates, requiring involvement in updates by the plan sponsor, and suggested including a model timeline or example for the FSRP process. One commenter noted that statutory changes may not be necessary given the small number of systems triggering the FSRP requirement. And finally, one commenter suggested that the PRB develop transparency and independence requirements for reviews by investment advisors, and suggested that we create model guidelines and checklists for reviewing proposals and fees. Overall, these comments supported several of the draft changes and none opposed any of the changes, suggesting that the changes contemplated are acceptable to stakeholders. So now I will turn it over to Mr. Fee.
I'm David Fee, the staff actuary. So let's talk about draft guidance materials and rule changes. So we have 5 categories of changes being considered. That includes disclosure of inadequate funding arrangements, progress updates, clarification of FSRP due dates, general language improvements, and minor technical corrections. Disclosure of inadequate funding arrangements, which are already required but have not been monitored for compliance. For that, we've developed a new sample notice, and in 610.15c would require systems to send a copy of their notice to the PRB so that we can ensure compliance in the future. For progress updates, which have had consistent compliance but inconsistent formats, we've developed a new progress update form, and then in 610.31 would require that form to be used in the future. For clarification of FSRP due dates in a post-2025 world, 610.30e clarifies how that 2-year deadline works. For general language improvements, we've removed outdated text in 610.31. We've added more precise corridor language in 610.20 and 610.32, and clarified sections that only apply before September 1st, 2025 for voluntary FSRPs, legacy FSRPs, and that's in 610.14, 610.20, and 610.32. And then we have some minor technical corrections in 610.20 and 610.21. So for guidance materials, we have a new model notice and a new progress update form. For disclosure of inadequate financing arrangements, the new model notice was modeled after the PBGC annual funding notice. But while the annual funding notice is 9 pages long and goes out to members of all private pension systems regardless of their funded status, ours is barely over 1 page long, and it's intended for underfunded systems only with funding periods greater than 30 years. It includes information from the last 3 actuarial valuations. That includes those valuation dates, the assets and liabilities on those dates, the funded percentage, and the funding period. Then we have definitions of each of those 5 key terms, a link to the PRB data center, and contact information for the system administrator. When a system receives a letter that they've triggered an FSRP, we would now remind them that they need to inform their members of that inadequate funding arrangement, and we would include a link to that new model notice. The new progress update form includes a summary of any recent discussions between the sponsor and the system, the dates and expected topics of any upcoming scheduled discussions between the sponsor and system, signatures from both the system and sponsor. And while the form could be voluntary or mandatory, for now we've included language in 610.31 that would make it mandatory. Again, when a system triggers an FSRP, we would include a link to the new progress update form in that letter. This recommendation to provide more guidance on progress updates received support from 2 stakeholders. One stakeholder also suggested including a model timeline and requiring formal plan sponsor involvement. We have not developed a model timeline yet. It would be a little tricky because systems have 2 years from the actual evaluation date. So if a system completes their actual evaluation within 6 months, they would have 18 months to complete their FSRP. Whereas if a system takes 12 months to complete their evaluation, they would have 12 months to complete their FSRP. So if we did come up with a model timeline, we would have to account for the very timelines that are possible. For plan sponsor involvement, that is already required, but the hope is that the new form makes that much more obvious to the sponsor that they're required to be involved.
Excuse me, I have a question. Can you clarify what circumstances trigger the use of this update form? You say on here, summary of recent discussions, those discussions within the city or with PRB staff.
What we're wanting is to find out what's been going on between the sponsor and the system. So they're required to give us updates basically every 6 months. I think it's a year after the first valuation, then every 6 months thereafter until the FSRP is done. And so in these progress updates, we're wanting some kind of formal way of giving them a way to give us those updates. Rather than right now, sometimes we've had informal discussions with them. Sometimes it's just with the system. Sometimes we get a joint letter from both the system and the sponsor. And this form would just give a similar way for everyone to fill it out and where they have an idea of what we're looking for.
Okay. I would just say from my standpoint, the standard for submitting one of these seems tenuous. Maybe I'm missing something.
So it is required in statute that they submit progress updates. So we're just providing more information on what needs to be included. So that, as David was saying, so that we're receiving more meaningful updates. Some have been very in depth in the past, but some have not. But the requirement already exists in statute. So we're just trying to provide an additional tool for systems and sponsors to get us information so that we know that they are making true progress towards submitting an FSRP on time.
What's the statutory standard?
Pardon me?
What is the standard that's in statute?
It doesn't provide much detail on it. Does say that there needs to be a draft if they have the plan already, but it doesn't have a lot of detail on what specifically needs to be included in the update. So we're trying to provide a little bit more information, both in rule, which would require the form, and then within the form itself, so that they are, actually providing a meaningful update on the steps that have been taken, the types of options they're considering.
Seems like it relies somewhat on the honors. There doesn't seem to be some official public vote or action or publication to instigate. City talks to the system. Presumably that could justify this. We may never know that.
Well, I mean, they're required to submit the progress update by statute, and so they're required to tell us like what they've been doing in that regard. And they're not all going to be doing the same thing. They may not be on a slightly different time frame, but this is just we got a lot of questions over the past couple of years from systems wanting to know, and cities too, wanting to know what they need to submit. So this is really just to standardize that process to address those questions.
And we do remind them, I think, in the trigger letter of this statutory requirement, and I think leading up to the subsequent progress updates as well, so that they stay aware of that requirement. And like David said, the requirement is in statute that both the system and sponsor are involved in the updates. So I think making that more clear so that we're sure that they are working together on those updates will yield fruitful results.
Do you think you're required to provide this every 6 months?
Correct.
So regardless, we'll hear from them these systems that are in this process, we're going to hear from them every 6 months. But if the director of the system calls the mayor and chance out the city, but we may or may not ever know about that conversation. But that's not an official action, but beyond the honors. Okay, just trying to get clarification on what the expectation is. 6 months.
I think that having a form with a spot on it to tell us about discussions between the sponsor and the system encourages discussions between the sponsor and the system.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I also think that, that is something that they would want to tell us about, because I think they would want us to know that they've been having those
You're
discussions.
doing something.
Right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So now we'll go over preliminary draft language in Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 610. So 610.14, we're saying voluntary FSRPs were applicable before September 1st, 2025. In 610.15, we're adding the requirement that systems provide a copy of the communications to the PRB so that we can ensure compliance with disclosing inadequate financing arrangements to the members. 610.20, we've improved, I think, the corridor language. So before it said a system will be considered compliant if plan experience exceeds a corridor in a favorable way. And the new language would read a system would be considered compliant if the funded ratio exceeds the minimum threshold or funding period falls below the maximum threshold. And then we've also added 2 minor technical corrections. 610.21 just have 1 minor technical correction. 610.30 basically says a system doesn't have to wait until 2 years after the evaluation date to submit their FSRP. They can submit it any day during that 2-year window. 610.31, in addition to specifying that systems and governmental entities must submit their progress updates, it now would say that they need to submit it using this new form. We also strike outdated references to voluntary FSRPs and FSRPs triggered with evaluation dates prior to 2021. And this recommendation to provide more guidance on progress updates receives support from 1 stakeholder. In 610.32, this updates the same quarter language that we just went over for 610.20. And then it also modifies language to reflect that voluntary FSRPs were authorized prior to September 1st, 2025. Now we'll look at potential statutory recommendations. So you might remember that many municipal systems require legislation to make benefit and contribution changes. And so it then becomes redundant once that legislation is passed to then require a city council meeting approval and a board meeting approval in public, but that's currently required by statute. So we have a recommendation 1 on this slide and a recommendation 1A on the next slide, and both address this issue. But recommendation 1 is more broad. So recommendation 1A is very specific to this category that municipal systems, they've induced legislation's passed that change their benefits and contributions, and we no longer require a public city council meeting, a public board meeting to approve that. Recommendation 1 encompasses that, but also basically encompasses other possibilities, including maybe possibilities that we haven't even thought of yet. It just gives us more authority to deal with those situations. Recommendation 2.
Speak one moment, please.
Chair, do you need us to, it sounds like a decision on which we recommend here, or do you want to handle that later? Or?
This is today, we're just saying.
Okay.
But you're free to comment. But we'll be discussing more fully in
All right.
Oh, I would just encourage committee members to, like, if you have opinions on these items, please let us know, just because that helps us to tweak the language for the next time that we present these recommendations, which will be to the full board in July.
Thanks for that. I do think it would be helpful at a point of your choosing, Mr. B, if you could just elaborate on the difference between 1 and 1A.
So 1A is very specific. It's just for this one instance where we're talking about a municipal system that's got legislation that took care of the need, that basically produces an FSRP. And we're saying you no longer have to, once you've done that, you're done. You no longer have to do this extra step of having a public city council meeting approval in minutes and a public system board meeting in minutes. It's specific to just that situation. One is more broad. So I think we have one example here on this slide where we talk about maybe a system statute requires voter approval. And so the election results could suffice for documentation as like another example that we could allow. But basically, it just gives us more broad authority to deal with any situation rather than just that one specific situation in 1A.
Sounds like you think number one would be more helpful.
I mean, one definitely gives us the authority we would need to deal with multiple situations, but 1A is a specific situation that we think is very clear cut that could easily be improved.
And also 1A addresses a specific scenario that we actually did encounter in real life. So
would one provide opportunities perhaps for, lobbying via system to kind of avoid some of the process? Would it make life too difficult for PRB to have that much flexibility?
I don't know that it would create that issue, but it would, it's easy for us now to point to statute and say, here are the submission requirements set out in statute. As David's saying, we are aware of this one instance that's addressed in 1A where there was a system that had a challenge, and so we know that could address something that's an actual like real world issue we've seen. Whereas it would be a bit broader. We would have to, at least as the recommendation is currently drafted, we would do that in rules. So we would need to come back before this committee if this were to pass and think through what those scenarios would be and what submission, and what would need to be submitted in order to satisfy the FSRP requirement in a range of scenarios. So there would definitely be some additional rulemaking probably in our future for that. So no, I don't know that there would be necessarily lobbying by systems, but it is right now, we can definitely point to what we do have in statute that's required.
So under one, you could narrow what you would accept through rulemaking, but it would require rulemaking.
As it's drafted, yes.
So the next step in this process, as you enumerated earlier, Mr. Ernstine, is to solicit stakeholder feedback on proposed changes. Do we have the proposed changes yet? Is that what we're looking at here?
Yes, these are draft versions of the proposed changes. So the information that's in the slides is basically what's in the draft proposed statutory recommendations, but those are also in your packet. It's just a one pager with those. It's 3 recommendations, 1A, and 2.
So in the next steps, solicit stakeholder feedback. Are folks who want to going to be opining on 1 or 1A?
Yes, we'll definitely send those out.
Okay, so we're going to get people specifically looking at that.
Yes.
Here, thank you. Please, thanks for indulging us.
Yeah. Okay, so for recommendation 2, we would be establishing a compliance report and a progress report, and I'll discuss each of those on the next. So the compliance report would be a biennial report to the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House, and it would go out at the same time as our usual biennial report. It would be to highlight non-compliance issues that are subjects. The progress update would go to the Senate Finance Committee and House Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services Committee, and it would be similar to the FSRP report that I provide to you in our full board meetings, and hopefully that would also help encourage compliance.
Chair, I think
Please.
this is really in response to our concern that we have at the PRB, we don't have enforcement um, capability. So I think this does, I think, a good job of essentially adding a few things that make non-compliance more visible to the legislature in order to really support compliance with people.
So we're talking about two things here. One is the biennial report. The other is a regular update. How regular?
How regular would you like it?
Yeah, I think it's useful. You have something to say?
I was just gonna say that, David, mentioned that, it would essentially be the same format as what he presents to the board at each of our meetings, so it could just be something that, we do after regular board meetings. Like, cause we're already creating that report, it's just a matter of sending it to the chairs of those committees.
So you think that might be roughly quarterly?
Typically, it depends on the year, so it's, in a session year, like, we don't typically have a full board meeting until the summer. But we have to have 3 meetings a year by statute, and so it would at least be 3 times a year.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's useful for the legislative folks to know about this sooner rather than later. So that sounds good. Thank you.
So that concludes our
Yeah, I
remarks.
can't hear you well.
Comments, questions on what we've heard so far? Again, this is going to go out to Mr. Harper. Did you want to say something?
Yes, sir. On that previous slide between bullet 1 and bullet 2, on bullet 1 with the compliance report, slide 29. Sorry.
Thank you. We're with you.
On the compliance report, should we also send that not only to leadership, but also the appropriate standing committees?
Do the members of the standing committees get the biennial report?
Well, the normal biennial report.
I don't believe that they're required recipients, but we can check. But I mean, as those are the committees that are generally working on pensions matters, we certainly could include them on that standalone FSRP biennial
Seems like a
update.
good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll add that to it.
Agree with that?
Okay. Thank y'all.
Good point. Thank you. Other comments, questions?
Could we go to the inadequate funding notice sample in the packet?
Do we have the packet?
I don't believe we have it in the slides, but it is in your packet.
Right.
It should be just after the rule language and the statutory one-pager.
I have a very brief comment on the inadequate funding notice, and that is in the introductory paragraph. The last sentence, it talked about must send to their members at the time of the next annual statements that are being provided. And I guess I think that refers to the requirement that benefit statements be provided to members, but I think it should perhaps clarify that that is the benefit statement, annual benefit statements being provided to members.
We can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Good point. Other comments? Questions? So this is going to go, same information is going to go out to the folks that are going to have a chance to share their thoughts.
Correct. Yes, we'll send it out shortly after this meeting and get feedback and bring that to the full board in July.
We don't need to take them.
No action today.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, that's a wrap on item 6. Next Discussion of possible revision or changes to policy or regulation of non-compliant time system. It must be Mr. Burnham. Mr. Burnham, welcome. Item 7.
Thank you. Good morning, members. I am Brian Burnham, Analytical Services Team Lead, and I'm going to present to you possible revisions or changes to the policy for regulation of non-compliant retirement systems. In your packet, there are copies of the current policy, the updated policy, and a red line version showing the changes between the two. So the policy was originally adopted back in 1996 and was only updated a handful of times before our last update in August 2013, which was following changes from the sunset legislation. The policy focuses on the steps the agency takes regarding compliance with Section 801-209 of the Texas Government Code, specifically maintaining a list of systems non-compliant with reporting requirements for 60 or more days, and notifying the sponsoring entity of those retirement systems about the non-compliance. The current version of the policy only applies to the annual financial reporting, which includes the audited financial report, report on system membership as of the end of the fiscal year, and the investment returns and assumptions report, form PRB 1000. This is because these 3 reports have a set deadline and statute of 210 days after the end of the system's fiscal year, while other reports have deadlines that are more variable, such as investment policies and summary plan descriptions and their amendments, which have due dates of within specific amount of days after they are amended. There are now additional reporting requirements that were implemented after 2013, and staff also has the ability to better track additional reports, such as the actuarial audits and the experience studies that we present at each board meeting. And so we believe we have the ability to expand upon this policy. So for the proposed changes, the updates to the policy do not change our current practices, but instead they do focus on better aligning the language with what we currently already do. Our proposed changes to the policy would include all required reporting, including MET forms, the PRB 150 and the PRB 2000. The FSRP requirements, though, would be currently excluded from the proposed changes, as the board adopted a separate compliance policy for FSRP back in 2022. The proposed changes aim to better line up the policy with current practices, specifically around our communication with systems prior to them reaching the 60-day non-compliant threshold. Currently, we provide systems with a reminder of upcoming reporting deadlines roughly 60 days and 15 days before the reports are due. We also provide systems with late notices 15 and 45 days after their due dates if we have not received the reports. If the system remains non-compliant for 60 days, we notify the sponsoring entity of the retirement system, which is usually a city council or a district board of managers, via a letter signed by our executive director, and then we CC the system on that correspondence. The policy also specifies that staff will provide the full board with an update on compliance at each board meeting, and was updated to better reflect what goes into those reports. For a timeline, we began working on the proposed changes back in February and throughout March. Any suggestions from the committee today will be incorporated into the proposed changes, and we then plan to seek stakeholder feedback in the coming months. We then will present the updated policy at our full board meeting in July with possible adoption, or if the board requests further changes, we could propose a draft for possible adoption in the September meeting. If there are no questions or discussion, that concludes my presentation.
Questions, Mr. Burnham?
Chair, I would like to, again, I'm referencing the policy for regulation of non-compliant retirement systems that's included in the packet. I would make a suggestion, while you've listed the government code sections, it would be, I think, really handy to list the actual report names, perhaps in a chart, so that it's very understandable to the trustees of various systems as to what reports they're responsible for providing.
Yeah, and just a clarification, that would be item number 3 in the policy to update that, because that's the one that says chapter 802 or 40 Texas Administration Code, chapter 607, 140.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I was just clarifying that that's item 3 in the policy that you would like to have that changed to. I believe, just
Yeah.
to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
on the same page. Yeah.
So, if you could include, I think, just a listing of the reports.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
So are we proposing a change to statute?
No, this does not change statute. This just changes our internal policy on how we're meeting that requirement in statute of 801-209, I believe. So, yes.
Thank you. Fifth adjournment.
Yep.
Yeah, so these are revisions to a board policy that the PRB has previously adopted and modified. And there's no statutory recommendation involved.
Thank you. Other questions, comments on this item? Hearing none, thank you. We've got someone who'd like to speak on the previous agenda item, number 6. Thank you. I'm going to reopen item 5, public comments.
Good morning.
You look familiar.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Kumar.
Thank you, sir. Anumeha Kumar with Austin Firefighters Retirement Fund. Thank you so much for reopening the public comment section. I just wanted to thank you all and the staff for the proposed FSRP rule changes. In particular, one of the recommendations, 1A, statutory changes. One of the recommendations, 1A, applies to us. We went through the legislative process back in 2025. I'm sure you all remember that. And it was an arduous process with ton of negotiations back and forth, and the Pension Review Board was intimately involved. Your staff was intimately involved in assisting both our plan sponsor as well as the fund to go through the process. Once the legislation passed, which was of course an agreed upon changes that passed through the legislative process, we had conversations with the Pension Review Board whether or not we would have to again approve the changes that was passed by the legislature through our board as well as through the City Council. In one of the recommendations we had going through that process was it seemed redundant when we had already passed the changes to again go through our board and through the City Council. So I think this proposed change would be efficient, take the redundancy out of the picture, and would remind, if you had a legislative session as long as we did, of everything that we had gone through. So we appreciate the recommendation a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I understand, and maybe staff should answer this, you're welcome to as well, school on it, you are suggesting that we be better off with 1A than 1.
It's my I wasn't clear if it was an either or both of those were being recommended, but we definitely support 1A. And with 1, if it offers more flexibility both to the systems as well as to the board to work through additional options, I think that would be amenable as well. But 1A certainly addresses our specific situation, which I'm sure y'all would encounter in the future. Hopefully not, but if there are any, then that certainly addresses that redundancy that we experienced.
So 1A is basically a subset of 1. So the scenario that I'm talking about is one scenario. So it's much more narrow than the other option.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, while we're open, here's another chance for public comment. We have public comment. Second chance, step forward, seeing no one. We're on to future meetings. Are there items that a committee member would like to add to the agenda? We've heard a little bit today about what's upcoming. Next actuarial committee meeting is TBD. Next meeting of the full board will take place July 23rd, 2026, 10 o'clock, right here. This place. There's no further business, no objection. I move to adjourn this meeting. So I have a second.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining. Good to see you. Have a great day, Mr. Harper.
Yes, sir.